is up, everyone? Welcome back to Keeping Score, a professional women's sports podcast. I'm Emma Askren alongside your co-host, Dylan Heinrich. Today, we're going to be talking all things PWHL per usual, since that's our only professional women's sports league going on right now. And we've got a lot in store for you guys. But we're going to go over the recaps of the games. And with the PWHL going in full fling right now, we're actually going to talk about potential names for the trophy that they're going to be giving at the end of the season. So stay tuned to the end of the episode for that. But first, let's bring in some personal stuff. We're thinking about kind of creating a dope or nope section for this podcast where Dylan and I kind of talk about our dope for the week and our nope for the week. So I can go ahead and start as an example. My dope is the girl dinner I am having tonight. I would like to shout out Griot's Pickles. I've been craving them for the past, I don't even know how long, but I finally went to Target because that is the only spot I can find them. And I finally went to Target and I'm eating Griot's Pickles and Coke Zero. I did have a more healthy dinner before this, but I just wanted something to snack on during the episode. So if you hear some very loud crunching, it's totally not me and my Griot's Pickles. So that's my dope. My nope for the week is today's weather. What the heck? It was so windy here in Fort Collins, and they might as well start calling it the Windy City because holy cow, my hat was almost blown off several times. And Lord knows I keep those things lodged on my head. So those are my dopes and nopes for the week. What about you, Dylan?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with the nope. I'm gonna go negative first. I lost my water bottle today. I had it. It was right there, and then I left the building, and then I realized, oh shoot, I cannot go back to that place for another week because it's shut down for renovation. So either A, it will no longer be there, and I will have to buy a new water bottle, and or just continue using disposable one and find the place and see if they have a lost and found. But I will go dopes for the week. I am finally an adult. I did my taxes. And I feel like a true paying adult. I think my return is going to be, I'm not going to give it out because I think that's personal information, but it's going to be pretty good. And I'm getting a little bit of that ching back in my pockets. So I'm finally moving up in the world. I am no longer just like an 18-year-old child.
You know what? Fair. That's so fair. Because I think if I tried to fill out my taxes by myself, I would commit tax fraud. So props to
Accidentally,
you. Yes,
accidentally
yes,
to
accidentally. IRS, don't come knocking on my door, please.
IRS, please listen to our podcast. I guarantee there's got to be one person who would like it, but we are not committing tax fraud on this show. I mean, hey, if you want to let the local authorities know and tell them to come listen to our podcast, not for the tax fraud stuff, just because it's cool,
Or maybe for the tax fraud stuff. If that brings
or maybe
viewers
for the
in,
tax fraud. It's
then you
it's
never
up to
know.
you.
On tax fraud, I don't really know how to create a good transition from that. But yeah, this week has been quite eventful in terms of PWHL games. So I figured we should go ahead and just dive right into that. We've got Ottawa versus Boston. Ottawa's just cementing that kind of I don't know, name they're creating for themselves throughout this league in the middle of the pack right now. But this was a much needed win that they actually needed. They ended up winning this game over Boston 4-2. And it was kind of a double header almost because a couple days later, Ottawa and Boston faced off again, where Boston actually took the dub. So kind of a little back and forth there. But let's go back to that first game I was talking about. It was very goal ridden. Ottawa had 4 goals. Boston, of course, had 2. That first goal was scored by Ottawa's own Daryl Watts in the 8th minute of the first period. That was pretty much the whole goal scoring for that first period. So nothing really more to say there. The second period, however, was where things got heated and quickly. A lot of back and forth between Ottawa and Boston. Boston responded pretty quickly in only the 2nd minute of that second period by Taylor Gerard. So she's a name we've kind of been hearing a little bit more of and something I'm really excited about. And she was she an incredible play there, and what a way to respond after going from 12 minutes with no scoring in that first period to responding with only 2 minutes only in the second period. So kind of a great response from Taylor Gerard there. And then Ottawa, of course, had to respond in classic fashion. Gabby Hughes got that second goal for Ottawa, making it 2-1. And then Boston had a quick clap back response to that nearly almost a minute later Abby Cook from Boston was able to respond very quickly and ferociously, to say the least, where she got that second goal, tying the game up 2-2 in the second period. And then Ottawa ended the second period with another goal from Gabby Hughes. So Gabby Hughes got a brace in this game, which is cool to see. And I haven't really heard a lot of things from her. So good to see that she's making a presence for herself on the ice, especially with a brace, no less. So half of Ottawa's goals came from Gabby Hughes. And then in the third period, Ottawa just cemented that loss for Boston and scored a goal in the 19th minute with only a couple seconds remaining in that third period by Brianne Jenner. And we've talked a lot about her, so it had to be a really solid goal. It was an empty net goal, but I still count it. It still counts on the scoreboard. So nothing better to say there. What are your thoughts on this game, Dylan?
Yeah, this was a nice Monday night game. Both Boston and Ottawa have been lacking behind, been like not in terms of like quality of play, but just in terms of number of games played. Montreal's played a lot, Toronto's played a lot, but these two haven't played as much. That's why you'll see them pop up a lot in the recap this week. So this nice little doubleheader, the only game on Monday and then one of two games on Wednesday. We'll see Ottawa for a third time even after this. So these two teams, it's nice to finally see and hear a lot more from their players, especially someone like a Gabby Hughes, who's now up to 4 goals. Didn't mention her by name, but Emily Clark got the goal, got the assists, primary assist on both of the Hughes ones. One came on the power play, the other shorthanded. And so those are some very, very important pieces for Ottawa. And then the rest of this game, Ottawa goes 1 for 2 on the power play, Boston 0 for 2. We've been talking about the difference the power play makes. Just goes to show Emmerance Mashmeyer. She's going to be basically the star of this episode. We're going to talk about her a lot. 30 out of 32 saves. Erin Frankel of Boston, the goaltender. Not quite the perfect game from her. Only 29 out of 32 saves. Not bad by any means, but just Mashmeyer was able to just outdo her to secure the road win for Ottawa.
I just want to go back to that power play. I feel like every single episode on this podcast we've talked about it, but like honestly, I don't have a lot of complaints about this league. But my one complaint is convert power plays. It's just like you have such a solid opportunity there. I mean, the opponent's team is down a man, and so it's so disappointing for a team like Boston to have two power play opportunities and not be able to convert either of those. I think that's something that a lot of fans also might have some concerns about going in the future, but overall, it's also just cool to see the strength of the defensive sides of all of these teams. We talked about it last week. Again, we had to bring it up this week, but like the defensive side of all of these teams is clearly, clearly, clearly key from all of the head coaches across these teams. And I mean, yeah, that kind of goes right into that next Ottawa Boston game where I said that Boston won. Boston ended up taking the victory with 3 points to Ottawa's 1 point. Boston got the scoring off started pretty smack dab in the middle of that first period in the 7th minute. Lauren Gable scored that first point. Ottawa clapped back in the 16th minute, so a couple of minutes later, by Katarina Mrazova. She has also been a name we've talked about just a little bit, but again, with the kind of emphasis on the Toronto and Montreal teams as well as Minnesota, like it's cool to see that we're getting to talk a little bit about these players from both of these other teams as well. So Katarina Mrazova, got that first goal for Ottawa in the first period, and then in the second period, Boston, talk about quick. They were only 45 seconds into the second period when Susanna Tapani scored the second goal for Boston. So, kind of, I mean, impressive to say the least. That's really awesome stuff to see and really exciting. I mean, what a way to start the second period where it might be a little bit of a lull in the playing. Clearly not for Boston with that goal in the 45th second of the second period. And then of course, Hillary Knight had to score that goal in the second or third period, I believe. So she definitely made a name for herself. Like it's cool to see. I keep saying that, but like Hillary Knight is definitely someone who we haven't really heard that much from. Again, like Dylan mentioned, Ottawa and Boston both haven't been playing that many games, so it's good. Like, so now that we're talking more about these teams, we're gonna start hearing more from them. But it's really still surprising, in my opinion, to see a player of such high caliber as Hillary Knight not scoring that many goals when you have players like Alina Mueller, of course, who we did a player feature on before, kind of taking the reins on goal scoring for this Boston team. But it's good to see Hillary Knight getting her name on the board for this Boston win over Ottawa.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Knight hasn't had the best start in terms of scoring for this Boston team. She's got 2 points and 2 assists through this game. I don't believe that's been updated at all yet. Again, by the time you listen to this, these numbers will have completely changed, but that's okay. And so
Welcome to
Hillary Knight is definitely,
PWHL.
what can you do? And so Hillary Knight is definitely one of, if not the biggest pro women's hockey players in the entire world. Definitely someone who's a face that people know, a name people know. And I think that it's something that people are just going to have to grow used to, that, hey, maybe sometimes the biggest stars aren't going to get all the goals. Hillary Knight is still a very good, impactful player, but she is not, to be to be nice, the player on Boston right now. That's Alina Mueller and her incredible talented ability. She also got the initial assist on the first Boston one. So she's been rocking it. Looking at the power plays again, still no conversions. Ottawa 0 of 4, Boston 0 of 3. Well, you can't expect to score a power play goal every time in these first two games. Boston 0 of 5 on the power play. Not great, but you still escape with the win. Aaron Frankel and Emmerich Mashmeyer back in the net again. This time it's Frankel outdueling Frankel outdoing Mashmeyer. She makes 29 out of 30 saves compared to Mashmeyer 20 out of 23. So not only did Frankel face more shots, she gave up less goals. And so that was a huge bounce back win for Boston. We'll take a look at these standings, but these are both teams that are right now on the outside looking into the playoff picture. Every win, especially against these teams that are on similar stature, they are extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's kind of what I use as my transition into this next Ottawa Boston game. But like the power play, guys, you had four power play opportunities. It's clear that these women are hitting hard and creating fouls and creating the power play, but come on now, like it's a power play. Like that, it's called a power play for a reason. You literally have the stronger roster in this scenario. So honestly, like as both a fan and a journalist, like it's shocking to see these teams being unable to convert on the power play. But I mean, still, like you can't complain too much, right? You're drawing huge masses of fans, and it's still great hockey regardless. I kind of want to go back to what you said about Hillary Knight. That's kind of one thing I noticed about Toronto in the early period of the PWHL was like just a player like Sarah Nurse not scoring that many goals and not getting her name on the assists for those goals they were scoring. And that's kind of a similar situation as Knight. Like I feel like they're kind of creating a more behind the scenes leadership aspect. These are players who we've heard their names a lot. We know who they are. And so I feel like they're kind of being put into more of a leadership role and being able to lead players like an Alina Mueller in Hillary Knight's case in Boston, that maybe she's a little bit younger. She might need that kind of mentorship role from a player like Knight. And so that's maybe why we're not seeing her scoring that many goals, because she's just creating those goal scoring opportunities for other players who are going to be maybe around in this league for a little bit longer than she might be.
Yeah, I looked it up. Knight is she's currently 34 years old, will be turning 35 this year, been playing professionally since 2006, and was also born on the same day as I was, July 12th. So shout out Hillary Knight, fellow Cancer. But that's a very exciting piece. And I mean, you look at it, and I think Hillary Knight still plays a valuable role on and off the ice. One of those players who has been in leadership a lot that we're going to talk about today for our player feature, spoilers, is Alex Carpenter from New York. As we take a look at New York and Montreal, New York beats Montreal on the road 3-2 in a shootout. This will be our first time covering a shootout here. So, as we mentioned, Alex Carpenter gets things rolling in the first 3 minutes, gets the first goal of the game. Primary assist coming from Abby Roque on the power play. There's your power play goal, Emma. We finally got it. And so later in that first period, we're seeing the flip end. Montreal on the power play trying to convert, but wait. Alex Carpenter again is going to get the shorthanded goal with just about a minute left in the first period. Once again, assisted by Abby Roque with a jailbreak goal. No more power play for Montreal. They weren't able to convert on that one. But late in the second period, down 2-0 on the power play again. Laura Stacey of Montreal gets the goal. Now we're at 2-1. New York's up heading into the third period. But Maureen Murphy of Montreal says not so fast. We're going to overtime. As in the last 10 minutes, nobody scores. We got 2-2. heading into overtime. We've seen a bunch of good overtime goals. Didn't happen in this one. 2-2, and we're in a shootout. And if you don't know how the shootout works, it's basically each team gets 5 shots. I believe each shooter is allowed to go twice, which we'll see come impacted and important later. I'll need to look up the exact rules, but I know you get at least more than just one. And so again, you get at least 5 attempts pretty much. And if you're even after 5, then you just go back and forth one-on-one. Montreal, this one only went 4 because Montreal missed all 4 of their first attempts, and New York got 2 goals, one from Abby Rope, and one, you guessed it, from Alex Carpenter herself. So kind of an unofficial hat trick for Alex Carpenter. Won't go in the record books as a goal, but she did put a third one past the net. So no need to even try that 5th one. New York able to pull off the big road win against, as we'll look at it here, Montreal, who is still the best team in PWHL by record. What'd you like out of this performance, and especially Alex Carpenter here?
For someone who is just seconds ago complaining about the lack of converting in a power play, it is so great to see these two teams converting on power plays, but on both sides, both New York and Montreal converting on power plays. This is a win that New York really needed to kind of boost their standing in the table. Granted, they're still in 4th place right now in the current rankings, but getting a win against the second-ranked team in the PWHL right now is nothing to shy away from, especially when you have players like Alex Carpenter scoring 2 goals and then creating opportunities again on the Montreal side as well with Laura Stacey and Maureen Murphy. I feel like a lot of kind of the star kind of highlights you see on Instagram happen in the overtime, where we've had a couple games now go to overtime, but they've been able to be converted within overtime. This is something, it's a first in the PWHL that going to a shootout is, I mean, yeah, it's a first. Need I say more? So it's just like really cool to see that this, we're still having firsts just going on in the PWHL, that this is still an inaugural league. We're still learning. People are still playing great hockey despite that. And I mean, what a shootout too. I mean, Montreal kind of unable to convert on their shootouts, but Abby Roque and Alex Carpenter, we've said a lot about them, and it's just really cool. But Abby Roque was able to kind of create that win for New York as well. And our goalies, of course, they had to have a name for themselves as well. And Renee DeBion actually didn't have as great of a game as we kind of anticipated, but she did kind of have less shots on goal than New York's, which is surprising for that Montreal team. Usually they're able to convert those shots on goal. Montreal, of course, like I mentioned, went 1-5 on the power play, and New York went 1-3 on the power play. But yeah, and Renee DeBion went 19 of 21 saves. Like I mentioned, of course, it was a 2-2 shootout. And then Abigail Levy was in goal for New York, and she blocked 21 out of 23. So stellar goaltending performances here in the PWHL. I've said it again, and I'll say it before. Goaltenders deserve more recognition than they get.
It takes somebody special to stand in front of a giant rubber puck that moves 80 to 90 miles per hour at least and just say, hey, go stand in front and grab it. It's like you do have a bunch of gear, but still, that takes an impressive person.
We're going to take a quick break, but we have more PWHL content coming back for you guys. We've got a game of New York versus Toronto, and then Ottawa versus Montreal, a high-scoring game, which we will hear more about shortly. All right, everyone. Welcome back from your girl dinner break that I hope you took. I hope you ate some pickles and drank some Coke Zero because Coke Zero
did your taxes.
Back to superiority and did your taxes, because go do those and don't commit tax fraud. And we're going to put a poll on Instagram, and we are going to ask the people whether they think Coke Zero is better than Diet Coke. On that happy note, let's talk about some rivalries.
Yeah, so we've got New York, Toronto, 2 very physical, defensive-centered teams. We've already talked about New York. They won their last game in a shutout. And would you looky here, we got another shutout, or not a shutout, shootout. 2 very different things, sound the same. We got 2 shootouts. This shootout went in favor of Toronto. They won 2-1. Like we mentioned, defensive-focused rivalry, all about the hard hitting, and that showed early. No goals for the first 2 periods. Just stellar defensive work, very similar to Toronto-Montreal that we covered last week, where it's a lot of hard hitting, a lot of good chances, but the goaltenders, shout out Corinne Schroeder for New York, and then Kristen Campbell of Toronto, played their minds out this game, especially in those first two periods. But the dam eventually has to break. With 12:34 passed in the game, so just about 7.5 left, Emma Maltese breaks the tie, getting her second goal. Not this Emma, different Emma. There's a lot of Emmas in the PWHL, side note. But so Maltese gets that first goal, but with less than 10 seconds to go, 8 to be precise, Ellis Shelton, the great defender from New York, alternate captain, gets the goal to tie things up and force an overtime assisted by Emma Woods. Again, completely different Emma. And then Alex Carpenter. What? There's Alex Carpenter again. And so overtime happens. We get 5 minutes. It's very similar to the first two periods. Good chances, better defense, better goaltending, no goals. So we head to the shootout, and this one was very similar to the New York Montreal one, but flipped. New York wasn't able to get a single one past Campbell. And then on the other side, Toronto gets two past, both of them from Natalie Spooner, who leads the PWHL in goals. She's great from the outside. She's great from down low, one-on-one action, one-timers. She's decent as a passer. Like, Spooner does it all, and this time she wins it for Toronto. Neither team gets a power play goal. 0 for 5 from New York, 0 of 3, from Toronto. Corinne Schroeder goes 29-30 saves. Kristen Campbell goes 27-28, including stopping all four in the shootout. What'd you like out of this defensive showdown?
Well, just that. It was a defensive showdown through and through. I was kind of following along with this game as it was happening, just on like Google and stuff, watching the scores. But like, I was like, is it lagging? Like, what's going on here? And then I realized, oh my gosh, the defenses of these teams are playing their hearts and minds out. So honestly, I just want to give a shout out to the PWHL defense that is going on right now, especially with New York and Toronto. Like, this is something that I've mentioned with power plays, but like the strength of these PWHL defenses has never been more evident, especially in the on the women's side. With through every single league, it seems that just the defense has been key. And honestly, it's kind of looking like whatever defense has a stronger, just a stronger line or whatever you want to call it, they're gonna get the win. And so Toronto getting the win here, although it came from a shootout, which is obviously so huge. And I mean, who better to win that shootout than Natalie Spooner herself, the goal scoring legend? And yeah, I mean, the PWHL varies a lot. And we'll talk about that in a second with our Ottawa Montreal game. But like the PWHL has anything you could possibly ever want as a viewer.
Exactly. You've got your top line depth, your top line talent, your depth. You've got a whole bunch of offense, defense, goaltender specialties, a little bit of everybody. There's more than enough stars and more than enough firepower. We've been teasing it a lot. Quite possibly the most exciting game in terms of goal scoring in the PWHL. Take it away for our final game of the week.
Our final game of the week, I mean, I have nothing better to say, but talk about playing the other side of the puck in this opportunity right here. The PWHL has that varying just everything. Montreal versus Ottawa. This was kind of a rivalry series right here. Of course, we had the New York versus Toronto, and then we had Ottawa versus Montreal. So those two, going back to the very beginning of the PWHL in January, these were the two first games that were played. So we've got US versus Canada, and then two teams that are just down the road from each other in Ottawa versus Montreal. Montreal ended up taking the dub with double the amount of points that Ottawa had. Montreal with 6 and Ottawa with 3 total points. 9 combined points between both of these teams. Talk about a high scoring game. Of course, Montreal had to get the scoring off. Right off the bat, or right off the puck drop, we should say, 9 minutes into the first period, Teresa Vanasova nonetheless scored for Montreal. She was assisted by Laura Stacey. And then Marie-Philippe Poulin, of course, had to put her name on there with the secondary. Ottawa, however, I mean, they weren't about to go down without a fight in this first period. They had to keep things tied up, and going into the first or ending the first period, only a minute later, scoring by a Kane Shiga from Ottawa. She got that second goal. or that first goal for Ottawa, I'm sorry. So it was tied going into that second period. And the second period, I mean, nothing happened. We got one goal from Montreal with only 2 minutes remaining left in that second period. Claire Dalton tapped it in to get Montreal up a point on Ottawa, but that was it in terms of goal scoring. Of course, it's the PWHL, so we had stellar defense and just line movement and overall playmaking capabilities being showcased from all of these players. But in terms of goal scoring for a game that had for a game that had 9 total points, there wasn't a lot of going on in the first two periods. And the third period is where things heated up very quickly, to say the least. A fire was lit under both of these Canadian teams. Ottawa got it started off strong, so keeping things tied, of course. Ottawa got that second goal for them.
Real quick, sorry.
I'm sorry.
You-
I totally misread our notes over here. That's my bad. Montreal, I'm sorry, got the first goal, starting things off, kind of boosting that 3-1 lead at this point in the third period. They scored in the second minute, and Sophie Betez, who we haven't heard anything from actually, she got her first goal. And yeah, I mean, 2 minutes into the third period, the goal I was talking about, of course, was in the fourth minute. So 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes later, I'm sorry, Ottawa responded with Daryl Watts. So she scored in the previous game. She's coming back again for seconds in this third period for Ottawa. She scored in the 4.5 minute mark in the third period. Montreal clapped back relatively quickly. 4 minutes later, almost on the dot, Claire Dalton again got a brace for herself. She was assisted by Marie-Philippe Poulin and Laura Stacey, so kind of good plays there going on in the eighth minute for Montreal. Ottawa, again, they're a feisty team. Like, they're going to hold their own against the big names like Montreal and Minnesota. Ottawa, of course, got their final goal of the period, scored by no other than Katerina Mrazova. We said her name, of course, in the previous game. And then just Montreal kind of sealed the loss for Ottawa in both the 15th and 16th minute, where Claire Dalton scored, earning herself a hat trick, and Maureen Murphy scored, earning her first goal of this game. So just high goal scoring, I'm sorry. Maureen Murphy scoring on an empty net. So yeah, just kind of good stuff all around. There were a couple power play goals scattered throughout there, but overall, a very high scoring game. And just talk about polar opposite from the New York Toronto game we just talked about.
Yeah. When you look at the NHL, for example, there's a lot more games, so there's a lot larger sample size, but you'll see some of these crazy games. I believe there was one this year that ended 9-7. We haven't seen a lot of that in the PWHL. It's been low scoring, reasonable. Your 4-3s, 3-2s, 2-1s. This was a good old fashioned offensive focus period, especially that third period too. Like, I'll need to check, but I believe that was what, 6 of those last goals were scored in that third period. Like, showtime on lock under the bright lights, some exciting hockey. Maybe you want to look away if you're a goaltender. Mashmeyer and Debian, not their best performances, especially from Mashmeyer, but she had made 3 starts in what was 6 days now. She will be looking forward to some rest, and we will likely be talking about maybe not Ottawa's goaltending situation this week, but at some point before the end of the season in May. What else do you like from this game before we look ahead to where we're at in the standings?
We said it from the beginning of this episode. We were going to talk a lot about Ottawa and Montreal, and that's very clear in the goaltending. Honestly, they might have just been fatigued. That could have been part of it. Obviously, no discredit to the star offensive capabilities of both of these teams, but the goaltenders had been through a lot of games this past week. And so that's a lot of fatigue to be putting on star goaltenders like Emirates Mashmeyer and Anne-Renee Debian, Montreal and Ottawa. And yeah, I mean, again, it might not have been their best night, but it certainly was for every single player we mentioned. Um, Let's talk about those standings and what we think are going to be the final projections for the season.
Yeah, so we're gonna go 1-6, top to bottom. Started off with the hottest team right now. It's Montreal. They've got 5 regulation wins, 3 overtime wins, 3 overtime losses. Only 2 regulation losses. So they've been very good at pushing it to overtime, and especially at winning those overtimes. Puts them first with 24 points on 13 games played. First in points, first in like points per game.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's honestly kind of shocking to see Minnesota in second place right now. But when you kind of look at the schedule, it's not terribly surprising. You might, at first glance, you're like, whoa, that's weird. But at second glance, when you take some critical thinking, you realize Minnesota hasn't played that many games recently. So they just haven't had the same opportunities that Montreal has had to kind of get the games played and goals scored. But Montreal is clearly very skilled, and they are going to give Minnesota a run for their money.
Yep. We'll breeze through Minnesota very quickly because we talked about their offensive firepower with Kendall Coyne Schofield, with Grace Zumwinkle, Taylor Heisey. The list goes on and on. They are currently in second, 5 regulation wins, 2 overtime wins, 2 overtime losses, 3 regulation losses, 21 points, 12 games played. They will be playing the day after we record this on Sunday, which should be when this video goes out. Hopefully, you're also listening to this on Sunday. So they will definitely have their fair share of games up ahead to try and catch Montreal for that number one spots, but they are currently in that good second spot, not really in any danger of dropping out of the playoffs. But one team who wasn't in the playoffs when we first looked at the standings and is now rocketed in the start, now on a 5-game win streak, which we talked about earlier, Toronto. The hottest team in the PWHL. So talented. They've finally put together the pieces, sitting at 5 regulation wins, 2 overtime wins, and still those 5 regulation losses from earlier this year they can't quite shake. So they're at 19 points, 12 games played, right behind Minnesota. What really has flipped that switch for Toronto? I know we talked a little bit about it a little bit last week, but it's nice to always revisit.
Something clicked. Something clicked that wasn't clicking in the first couple of weeks of the PWHL, and it is very evident to see just the strength and all-around firepower of Toronto. I mean, I don't really have a lot of critical analysis to say other than the fact that Toronto is, I mean, they're creeping up quickly on Minnesota. They're only 2 points behind Minnesota right now and 5 points behind Montreal. So that's one thing I really love about the PWHL is just how close these teams are in terms of points. I mean, no teams are separated by Ottawa has 13, Montreal has 24. So no team is separated by more than 11 points. That's still, obviously that's a kind of a stretch, but it's still doable. Like it's still feasible for Ottawa to be able to kind of bring that back up and get back into it. But going back to Toronto, I think they've just been able to mesh really well. And there's a lot of Canadian national teamers on there, but some of their good players are American. And so they might not have had a great opportunity to kind of click those star players to click necessarily. And I think now that they're kind of getting further down into the season, they're definitely doing a lot of more meshing, shall we say.
One team that Toronto beat this week came at the expense of New York. They are currently at 2 wins in regulation, 4 overtime wins, 2 overtime losses, 4 regulation losses for 16 points on 12 games played, and are currently slotted in that last playoff spot again. Only 4 of the 6 teams make it. So they're going to try and hold on and defend that spot. What's definitely interesting of note, 3 teams with 5 regulation wins. Boston and Ottawa both have 3 as well. New York only has 2. Seems like they're giving up some free points there. Wouldn't you agree, Emma?
I definitely agree. Just kind of looking at where the bottom three teams are at in terms of regulation losses, but also right or overtime losses, it's clear to see that these teams are just giving away free points. I mean, you've got 2 losses from New York, two from Boston, and then 4 from Ottawa. It's pretty evident to see why Ottawa's at the bottom of the table, but I think with some strength and with some kind of more defensive and offensive building, New York is definitely going to be able to solidify their spot in the playoffs for sure.
Yep, they're definitely a leading candidate, but Boston, right on their heels, as we mentioned, the 3 regulation wins, 2 overtime wins, 2 overtime losses, 4 regulation losses at 15 points, but only 11 games played. We've mentioned Montreal has 13 games played. The other 4 teams, not including Boston, have 12. Boston still has 11. They've got that extra game to try and catch up to everybody. And so, what do you think they are going to be able to do with that extra game, especially like as they're starting to click a little bit later, just from not being able to play as many games?
I mean, it's clear to see that Boston is struggling. I mean, anybody with a good set of eyes or ears can tell that, Boston is struggling. But like you said, they're at 11 games played, whereas the best team in the league has the most games played. So there's clearly causation or correlation there, depending on what you want to say. And I think it's definitely going to be a battle for fourth between New York and Boston. I'm very excited to see that battle go down, especially in the upcoming matches where they do play against each other. New York and Boston's points are the closest between everybody else in the league, and only separating them by 1 point. 16 points to Boston, New York 16 to Boston's 15 points. Literally any game essentially can alternate the table between fourth and fifth right now. And I love that. I think with only 1 point separating the team, New York and Boston, I'm very excited to see there maybe a breeding rivalry kind of go down between these two teams in the battle for the playoffs.
Like you mentioned, right on the edge of that playoff docket. If everything holds, one of those teams is making it, the other is not. But again, still a lot of time left. And one
Still a
team
lot
that's
of
very
time.
grateful there's a lot of time is Ottawa. 3 wins in regulation, 0 overtime wins, 4 overtime losses, 5 regulation losses, 13 points, 12 games played. Still only 3 points out of the playoff picture. But again, like you mentioned, like you can see there, 0 overtime wins, 4 overtime losses. They've gone to overtime 4 times, haven't been able to pull out the win. Those are 4 lost points that could have basically earned them a playoff spot.
I mean, looking at the points, that would have put them in fourth place if they got the wins in those overtimes. That would have got them into 17 points, putting them past New York at this point. But I think that's one thing that Ottawa's clearly struggling with is just regulation losses. So not being able to send it to overtime to even get 1 point, but also their overtime losses as well. They're just giving away free points. And I think holding on defensively is going to be the key for this Ottawa team to kind of hopefully just build and bring the table closer together for a more exciting playoff run potentially for Ottawa. But overall, table's really, really close. And you guys are just gonna have oh my gosh. You guys are gonna just have to keep watching those PWHL games because any game is gonna alter the table for sure.
So we've talked a lot about the table. Now it's time to focus not on the teams in those tables, but the players on the team in the table. And one player who's shining brighter than most, especially this week, Alex Carpenter, one of the assistant captains of the New York PWHL New York.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned her a lot, especially with New York having a couple more games this week. Alex Carpenter is just one of those names who we heard when Toronto or not Toronto. Oh my gosh, how dare I? New York, having less games, we were still hearing her name. So Alex Carpenter is definitely someone who I'm very excited to cover. She was born in North Reading, Massachusetts. So Boston almost, if I say so myself. But she is playing for the PWHL New York. She's actually the daughter of the former NHLer player Bobby Carpenter. So of course, familial relations there, and something that is very common with a few of the more American players that are playing in the PWHL is just NHL relationships and hockey, kind of a bloodline almost happening. Yeah, she had a very, very solid national team career and still has a solid national team career. She scored a goal for Team USA in 2010 of during the IIHF Women's Under 18 National or an International Championship in the gold medal game of that. But of course, Canada being Team Canada, Team USA ultimately fell to Canada and they had to settle for the silver medal. But still, I mean, Team USA, Alex Carpenter getting a goal as a pretty young player in an international gold medal match is still really cool to see. She was the youngest girl for Team USA in the tournament at only 15 years old. So talk about young players. She's been a name that has been around for a hot minute. She finished with the tournament with 8 goals and 1 assist in only 5 games. So a very, very clear plus points average right there. And then she was tied for second in team scoring behind a person we've already done a player feature on, Kendall Coyne Schofield. So she's definitely someone who like being 15 years old, tying in second place for team scoring behind Kendall Coyne Schofield is absolutely wild. And it was only a matter of time before we did a player feature on Alex Carpenter. What about her collegiate play at Boston?
Yeah, so wow, great shocker. We talk a lot about Northeastern, Boston, Boston College. It's Boston College this time around. She played there starting in 2012, spent her entire career there. Again, Massachusetts born and raised. She won the 2015 Patty Kazmaier Award, which, again, another consistent theme. I know a lot of these may start to blur the lines, but again, these are just like the best players in the world who are winning all the best awards just in separate years. So it's kind of showing off different eras. Like you got your Kendall Coyne Schofield at the very back end with like Hillary Knight. Now you've got your Alex Carpenters, and then in that next generation, you've got like your Alina Muellers and your Taylor Heises. So there's kind of these like three eras of women's hockey that are kind of coinciding as of right now. No other major accomplishments. Couldn't win a national title at Boston College, but still getting to play for her hometown team. While she was in college, she finally made the senior team and participated in the IIHF 2013 World Championship and remained on every Team USA from 2014 to 2018, including the 2014 Olympics, getting her first taste of that sort of experience. I believe they won the silver medal that year.
Like we mentioned, these player features start to sound very, very similar, but that's just the different eras and just just the incredible recruiting capabilities of all these teams, but also the overall skill of every single player in the PWHL. With 6 teams, you're going to see players that look and sound the same on paper, but play very differently. I mean, these are players like Alex Carpenter. I mean, again, yeah, she's very, very good. Let's go to a throwback to the past with the NWHL. Alex Carpenter was the first overall pick in the NWHL, and she was drafted by the New York Riveters. So a little bit of New York to New York relationships there. But she ultimately went back to Boston, back to Massachusetts, and was traded to the Boston Pride. She was actually one of the only, I mean, she was a very, very solid NWHL player. Anybody of the caliber of a first overall draft pick has to be a solid player. And she was just girl bossing it up, especially at a team like the Boston Pride. And I'm sure she was very excited to kind of be able to go back to Boston. But honestly, it's cool to see her playing in New York. She has a little bit of connection with the Riveters, so it's cool to see that coming out. Going back to her national team experience, just kind of interchanging between national team and collegiate here. She was actually sadly one of the final cuts from the 2018 Olympic team. So sadly she was on the 2014 roster, played really well in the 2014 Olympics, but she wasn't able to make the cut on the 2018 Olympic team. However, of course, she was brought back because any team that doesn't have Alex Carpenter is going to regret it. So she was brought back in 2019 for the 2019 World Championships. So back and better than ever in 2019.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those where, again, you talk about it, these players kind of have these two separate lives. They've got their college lives, which eventually turn into pro, and then you're still playing for your international team. You're, in her case, still repping the good old US of A. You get Mueller repping the Swiss. We try and go back and forth, try and cover both parts of their lives. And her life changed in a huge way in 2017 because not only did she sign up for the Canadian Women's Hockey League draft in 2017, she was drafted by the Kunlun Red Star, WIH, which was the Chinese expansion team in Shenzhen. Yes, you heard that right. The Canadian Women's Hockey League had a team from China that played in them for a couple of years.
Carpenter stayed in China and ended up not playing in Canada, where she joined the ZHHL, which just rolls right off the tongue. She ended up staying, and the ZHHL was in Russia, but she stayed in China with the Chinese team for a total of 4 years. And then she actually won the MVP for that league in 2020. And then she cited better facilities as the reason for staying, as well as player support. And she was kind of in line with both the professional players who were just kind of dealing with what was going on in the NWHL, the CWHL, those separate leagues. And she cited that the player support in this Chinese league or this Russian league was better than what was going on in America.
Exactly. Eventually, she worked her way back, was back on the Olympic teams in 2022, is now a seasoned veteran, brought home the silver medal, has played in this new rivalry series that the top US and Canada players have been playing in the last 2 years, including one that happened, I believe it was just about a month ago, whenever that last hiatus was that forced us to not talk about PWHL for a little bit. Only negative about that, the rivalry series was really cool and was also in the IIHF for every year since 2019. So again, all about repping that old US of A, which eventually brought her back to the States full time.
Yeah, going back to the States from China, she saw the creation of the PWHL, and I'm assuming just knew she had to be a part of it. Before signing with PWHL New York on September 8th, she was named as an alternate captain, all of this good stuff. She's just a clear leader who has experience. I mean, she's still fairly young. Like you see a lot of these players start at such a young age and they just grow their hockey IQ, their leadership capabilities. So she signed with PWHL New York on September 8th. And we kind of in our original first PWHL episode, she was one of those free agency signings. And she was named as an alternate captain alongside Ella Shelton. She currently leads the PWHL in points with 15. The next is Poulin with 12. So she is up there with some of the greats, I will say myself. She's second in goals with 8, and she's tied for third with 7 assists. So you can just tell by listening or looking at those stats that Alex Carpenter is an all-around good player.
Yeah, she has been like sneakily, I would say the best player, especially on the offensive end in the PWHL. It's taken us a little bit to talk about her because, again, just like the timelines haven't lined up right where we've been able to see a lot of her goals and assists. But she does something that maybe the Poulons or the Muellers of the world haven't been able to do yet. Like Poulin, elite level goal scorer, hasn't been able to rack up the assists. Mueller has been getting some crazy good assists, hasn't been able to rack up the goals yet. Carpenter doing really good in both. Second in goals, tied third in assists, which is the reason why she leads the PWHL in points by a margin of 3, which feels like forever. That usually will take most players 1, maybe 2 games to change that gap. And so that's only 12 games played. Poulin has 12 with 13 games played. Just an absolutely crazy, crazy start from Carpenter.
Yeah. I mean, she's not only been just kind of destroying it in terms of her all-around capability as a player, but we still have until May for the season. So that is several months before this PWHL season is over. And I mean, we've got a lot more games coming and we've got a lot more great opportunities for players like you mentioned, Mueller, Poulin, and of course Alex Carpenter to just only grow their statistics. On that note, we're going to cut to a short little break and then we are back with some more interesting content for you guys. All right, everyone, welcome back to Keeping Score. Thanks for taking that short little break with us. We have got 2 more segments for you guys, just our moment of our week and our silly little conclusion. We talked a little bit about swimming last week with Katie Ledecky getting beat. Let's talk about swimming again. My moment of the week is Gretchen Walsh. She is a sister of Alex Walsh competing at the University of Virginia. And if you guys pay attention to my social media or any swimming/women's sports social media in general, you will see that Gretchen Walsh is the first woman ever to break 20 seconds in the 50-yard freestyle. So the only thing about this is that it is slightly unofficial. So it's official in the sense that the time counts. However, because it was during a relay and off of a relay start, which means you don't put your hand on the blocks or anything, it means that it is faster. You're able to basically sprint off the blocks to get a relay start in. And so her flat start best time, which actually happened during the ACC championships, which is when she broke this record or broke 20 seconds. Her flat start best time is 20.57 seconds. And I don't know if any of you guys pay attention to women's swimming, but that is insanely quick for a 50-yard freestyle. Going sub 20 in the 50-yard freestyle during a relay. I know from my experience, I always go faster during relays. And apparently that is very applicable to Gretchen Walsh as well because she went 19.95 seconds, which is absolutely wild.
Yeah, just a crazy stat from Walsh. I mean, you bring it up. You are a resident swimming expert. I will literally dip my toe in, pun intended, every now and again. But I mean, just doing that, literally the first time it's ever been done in women's swimming. I don't care how she did it. She could have cannonballed into the pool and it still would have been impressive. Like the way that she's still able to get that amount of speed and momentum going, especially during the ACC championship on the highest stage, I am just very excited to see what she does during NCAA championships and to be very keeping track. I think Gretchen Walsh has, again, a chance to be one of those great swimmers you hear about year in, year out. Big spike during the Olympics, but for people like you who are women's sports and women's swim junkies, you will hear about her basically every week.
Yeah, and I mean, this wasn't the only record she broke at ACCs. She also broke NCAA records in the 50 freestyle with the time I mentioned at a 20.57 and the 100 fly with a 48.25. So just like, again, absolutely insane. And then she won a best time, which is the number three performance of all time in the 200 freestyle in the NCAAs at a 140.2.
For those of you who would try it, try swimming and timing yourself. It's like running a 40. You think you're gonna do so well, and you'll be very, very humbled in a short amount of time. Another player who is on the continuing on up and up. We talk about women's basketball a lot. It's the hottest thing, in my opinion, in all of sports. It's definitely my favorite thing to be watching. JuJu Watkins, USC sensational freshman. She scored 50 points against Stanford earlier this year. She just keeps racking up the records. She's actually on pace to break Caitlin Clark's new scoring record that she just set. So we will probably be talking about that 3 years down the line if things continue the way they are. But for now, she just broke the record for number of 30-point games in a season when she scored 42 in a home win against number 11 Colorado. Did it against a very, very stingy Buffalo defense, able to continue to compete in this just incredible Pac-12. And I think that while they're probably not going to win the regular season title, there's a really good chance that JuJu Watkins is able to use her talent and take this team to win the Pac-12 championship and at least make the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. Knock on wood. She is so talented at so young. The fact that she is also 18, same age as me, and doing all this blows my mind.
I mean, just like anything in general. I mean, like I'm just a lowly reporter, man. I'm just a lowly reporter, and these people are breaking records at the same time. I'm just doing this. Like I'm just reporting on them, you know? And I think like kind of going back to what you said where USC probably won't be able to win the Natty this year, but they definitely have a chance. And I think the presence of JuJu Watkins, especially becoming a sophomore after the end of the season, hopefully she'll be able to bring in some more big name talent and kind of build that USC roster up and maybe go for a national championship, especially like you said, if she's on track to beat Caitlin Clark's scoring record.
Again, anything can happen in March Madness. I think there are definitely 10 teams who could win it all. We have talked about a little bit. Everyone's chasing South Carolina, but I believe USC and JuJu Watkins got one of the best chances to catch them.
They're definitely some of the best contenders, that is for sure. On that note, we thank you guys for listening to today's episode of Keeping Score. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys ate some girl dinner along with me and Dylan today, and go buy yourself some pickles tonight. On that note, we will see you guys on Sunday.